Cyberpunk is a stubborn genre. A lot of its conventions are born out of a specific time and technological period, with a lot of world building and social commentary being born from that. That time being the 70s and 80s, where computers and their capabilities were first cropping up within the public, the mixing and melding of various Asian cultures into Western consumerism and popular culture, and the fears of societal collapse and/or control by megacorporations. Some even treat data and code as some form of magic. The issue one might have is that some 30 to 40 years later, when some of these stories are supposed to take place, they don't really reflect reality of technology, social issues, or even the general state of the world. Movies or shows or games that are building off these worlds envisioned in a different time might be able to have a spark of how bad things are in modern times. For example, Cyberpunk Edgerunner's inciting incident being that David's mom didn't have healthcare insurance, so she was left to get injured in a fire and then put down because he couldn't cover the medical costs. The rest of the show doesn't really follow the same praxis of the modern issue of healthcare being horrific though. But then, there's this episodic visual novel that in just one episode taps into so much of the original soul of Cyberpunk and rebirths it to a modern era. That VN is Of the Devil. Real quick though, if you find anything I might have said about the Cyberpunk genre to have been incorrect, comment down below. I'd love the engagement. Of the Devil is a murder mystery, court trial ADV game akin to Ace Attorney or Danganronpa. The gameplay is generally about gathering evidence related to murder and defending a client from whatever arguments the prosecution or police can throw at you. I'll get some more into how the devil does this uniquely, but first the most striking part of the game that will immediately hit you is the visual presentation. And similar to the latter game I mentioned, the presentation of the Devil is that of 2D sprites in a 3D environment. What makes this so striking is how the use of camera angles, filters, and cut-ins adds so much to scenes to impart tones and vibes that you couldn't get from a wholly 2D presentation. Which isn't to say this Western VN has solved the medium, considering that Kentaro Ujikoshi has been using 3D visuals for his ADV games as far back as Virtue's Last Reward and Zero Time Dilemma, and also that the sentiment is fucking stupid. It's more that for an indie dev with a core team of only about 4 people, it's pretty frugal to come up with a way to do so much with your visuals using essentially no new assets. But before I get too much into that, let's get into the actual game. This first episode's plot starts with Evangeline Morgan, a criminal defense attorney in 2086, taking up a case for a suspect of a 5-time serial killer, the Heartbreak Killer, at like 4 in the morning. The first half of this episode consists of searching through the environments of this police precinct and talking with the people in it. This gives a really good insight into the ground level politics and world of the devil. Stuff like renovation projects for public centers stalling, deals with research on how to improve public life going way over budget, which types of androids could be used for public services, and even how city maintenance has contracts with a specific corporation to provide their cybernetic modifications to employees. Not to mention how a lot of this is either discussed from one bureaucratic employee to another, or from news sites that end up paywalls or web searches. From what I've seen in Cyberpunk, there isn't much attention given to day-to-day policies or news. Either it's a feeling that everything is so lawless or corrupt that it really wouldn't matter what laws or public projects are being worked on, or the government is seen from the perspective of someone in a specific sector who'd be more embroiled in conspiracies and action that wouldn't lend entirely to discussing the bureaucracy of their worlds, which is something I really appreciate in this game and a similar game, Valhalla. There's attention and elaboration given to how these people's lives would work out from one evening to the next. Along with that, a big concept that really separates this Cyberpunk story from others is the realities of modern data. There's cameras on every corner, your phone is always listening and recording, all your technology is interacting with every other piece of tech it passes, and people can have impunitive evidence because they can submit a witness testimony through a video they recorded on their cybernetic eyes. It's not that hard to persecute anyone who commits a crime, but over time, the result is crime rates are incredibly low. With that, lawyers and investigators have largely gone to the wayside. This is what makes Of the Devil feel like it's still aligned with a lot of the aesthetics and world building of Cyberpunk while taking inspiration from societal ills of the modern day. Crime rates are already low today, so you can imagine where they'll end up in 60 or so years. Society is largely quiet and not on the edge of collapse, but that has its own surprising side effects. Despite how in control daily life is, people in the media will clamor and obsess over any violent crime that crops up. From that, police and justice systems rush to find somebody to quell public unrest, which leads to the case of this chapter. Back to the actual game, Morgan meets with the homicide cops in charge of her client's case and gains information and evidence related to the murder her client is a suspect of, which is then being used to pin him as the Heartbreak Killer. HK being somebody who has killed 5 people with an old firearm by shooting them in the heart. At this point, I might as well talk about the characters of this episode. Evangeline Morgan is a lawyer pretty good at masking her intent, keeping her internal readings and interest to herself to be able to extract more info from the people around her. It's a nice break from protagonists like Phoenix Wright or any of the Danganronpa protags of being unassumedly good boys, with her being a bit of an ass or painfully blunt about the state of things with her clients. Like her analogy to this interrogation and defense not really being about proving her client's innocence, but more fending off the state until they get fed up and let you go. Gotham London is an old-school police investigator who acts as a straight man, bringing up lab results taken from evidence to his partner, Farah Reyes. Reyes is a hot-headed, freshly graduated homicide detective who is chuny as fuck. Like, she has a cybernetic eye that looks normal, but she wears an eye patch over it when she's not using it. She also ends up acting really geeky when she says that the suspect wouldn't feel bad about destroying ungraded collectibles. The suspect of the HK case is Carlos Flat, a brutally sympathetic guy who slipped through the cracks of the surveillance state is being implicated in the murder of his girlfriend. The final character you don't meet until after you've already cleared Flat's name is District Attorney Emma Rockford. Despite her crude demeanor, she's incredibly smart, getting a correct read of what actually happened in this murder at a glance and fully understanding the modus operandi of the Heartbreak Killer despite the whole thing about them being how little evidence they leave. Piggybacking off of that, the style for the 2D art of this game is something to appreciate. It's not ugly, but it's definitely crude. I love it. Asymmetrical, gaunt faces, eyes and lashes being these sharp shapes. And yet, that's wonderful to me. It's one thing to make good-looking sprites. It's another to impart a specific spirit to them through quirks in your art style, like Morgan taking some form of pleasure in arguing with the police, almost like she's lessoned this to defend someone from being thrown in jail as much as she likes feeling right. With that, let's jump into the meat of the game, defense gameplay. I've been pretty vague about the details of this case. It's gonna stay that way, because I really don't want to spoil you on the writing of this mind-blowing murder mystery. The comparisons to Danganronpa and Ace Attorney are already going to be there, especially considering episode 1 has similar mechanics of calling out contradictions and testimonies, but I'm just gonna focus on this episode for now. The main 2 mechanics present are hand, presenting evidence to contradict the prosecution's argument, and wager, picking stay or raise to angles of attack that your opponent is bringing forth. I know it just implied I didn't want to compare this too hard to these 2 games I previously mentioned, but the first mechanic feels quite a bit different in its execution. Instead of having a bevy of evidence and possible contradictions to sort through, this feels a lot more streamlined and personal a debate between 2 people. And because you can't just run through the same lines over and over again until you precisely figure out what it wants from you, there's a sense of pressure to really pay attention to what this other person's argument is and see what actual information is associated with the evidence he's been handed. It has this tension to it. Another way the game adds tension that is even better is the latter mechanic, wager. At certain points, the detectives will start grilling you on your ability to prove that they don't have damning evidence against your client, with you having to make the choice to either concede or trying to argue against them. Earlier, when you were gathering information, you were gaining these poker chips with each interaction. This is the in-game representation of your credibility as a lawyer. Every time you submit wrong evidence or try to take a stance that doesn't hold up, you'll lose a bit of credibility. Even then, sometimes you'll lose credibility because there are some pieces of evidence or angles that are so strong that you can't win an argument with it, even if you concede. This ends up being some amazing ludokinography, as Morgan isn't a perfect lawyer and will get caught in traps that she can't wiggle out of. It also, from a gameplay perspective, adds a layer of treachery where you don't know when you'll get knocked down a few pegs that you might not have. A really funny thing about the credibility system, at least in this episode, is that if you run out and get a game over, it's not a thing of you getting implicated in the crime or flat explicitly getting sent to jail. Instead, you suck so much ass as a lawyer that flat straight up says he needs to get a better one and drops you. As a cherry on top of the whole gambling theme, near the end, you can ante up the credit you've been betting when presenting evidence, creating this rush as you pump that gauge up knowing you've got your opponent pinned. In the end, Reyes folds, Morgan clears Flat's name and comforts him about the loss of his girlfriend. She has a chat with the district attorney Emma, and she goes home knowing she's done good for an unfortunate soul. At this point, I'm gonna drop any vagueness around the actual story and get into the nitty-gritty of the story and themes. If you haven't played Of the Devil Episode 0, play it now. It's free in only about 2 hours. Or not. This is only the intro of a larger game, so it can end up selling you on it. Oh shit, I get to use the spoiler song again. So, the start of this piece in the Heartbreak Killer case is that Flat broke his girlfriend Diane's fidget tubbies due to his low-quality rental mod arm. He wrote a note for himself for an apology, but it didn't help much as they got into another fight, after which he storms out, not even locking the door to his apartment. At the time, the optic surveillance, you know, the systems that people have sacrificed their privacy for the sake of safety with, was down. No one was around as a witness, nor did Flat interact with any technology to leave any crumbs. He hears a gunshot, runs back to find the apartment trashed and Diane dead. In shock, he touches her, the gun, and ends up with blood on his clothes. Police soon arrive and he gets taken in as not just a suspect in this murder, but the murder of 5 other women. But who was Diane's killer? It's Morgan. She says so quite plainly and even flashes back to the cold-blooded act and the sort of analytical enjoyment she got from seeing this woman's death. She was even the one who roughed up the apartment. But why go through the effort? Well, her last 5 kills were in cramped, trashy places, so this last one would have been a nice contrast by being in a cozy, clean apartment, if not for the broken ceramic pieces on the floor. And so, rather than let the scene be inconsistent, she decides to wreck the whole apartment. Instead of maybe cleaning up that mess, probably leaving less evidence of her act and more time to get out without being caught. So after committing a murder at 9 PM, she waited about 6 more hours to take up the case, head over to the precinct, and defend the boyfriend of the person she just killed. There's even certain lines that come off differently when you know Morgan was fully aware of what the crime actually was. Even after getting him off, she comforts him with a detail about the crime scene the police missed, but she would have known about. The suppressant medicine Flat needed for his mod arm. Morgan knows this is a little fucked up to do, and at the same time, she didn't even know Diane was her name. I like girl characters who are selfish and bad people in a grounded manner. Having specific desires they'll go out of their way to achieve even at the expense of other people's well-being, while also being treated seriously by the story and not just some maniac is something not that ever present in popular fiction. Morgan is that to a T and more. She takes pleasure in killing as she sees it as a form of art, experiencing how different bodies fall and blood splatters. However, she knows she's a cold-blooded killer who's fucked up for wearing the mask of a good-hearted lawyer. Beyond even that, she hates how the media has attached itself to the Heartbreak killings and spun them out into this entirely different persona for those personal malicious acts she's committed. She even has these moments where you can tell something is bubbling up from within her the whole time she is working this case, way before it's revealed that she was the killer. And after a while, when a suspect isn't found, the media moves on and this becomes another cold case just as she knew it would. Alongside that, Morgan isn't treated as this wholly serious character the entire time. She has to tell this kid she knows that she won't sue her gym teacher for making her run laps on a bad stomach. She struggles with the technology and systems she has to interact with to take up this case. She sucks at drawing, and Emma basically pins down her exact personality as HK, despite the whole point around these killings was that there's basically as little evidence as possible left at the scene of these murders. She also makes a point about how Morgan really didn't even need to defend Flat, since even at the glance to her, it was obvious he wasn't the one who did it. In addition, Morgan herself notes how this is a cat-and-mouse-esque relationship between them. She's both a methodical, heartless killer and a fail girl at the same time. With that, I guess I should talk about Morgan and Emma specifically. I mean, part of the idea behind Of the Devil was about making toxic Yuri Phoenix right or something. Don't quote me on that, though. I'm pretty sure someone at Nth Circle said that, but it might have also come to me in a dream. Anyway, Morgan and Emma are rivals in the way that Morgan loses most of her cases as a defense attorney to Emma, while Emma acts really fucking casual outside of the courtroom. That's just the surface level relationship, though. Looking even a little bit deeper, Emma seems a bit onto something. She's able to ascertain Morgan's profile as HK, even though the practice of profiling has gone to the wayside, to the point that even a masterful mind as hers needs to go out of her way to study to understand how it's done. Not only that, she points out that many of the victims in the HK case all looked like her. While it was mentioned earlier in the episode that in a massive city full of people, a lot of people are going to end up looking alike. Brown eyes and brown hair aren't exactly uncommon physical characteristics. That said, for this attorney who could, through a glance at the evidence obtained for this case, get a conclusion to say this is really striking. The obvious idea to come to is that Morgan committed these murders as a sort of venting of anger and frustration towards her losses to Emma. Emma even mentions that optic outages aren't totally random, and with enough data you could predict where the next ones will be. Contradicting to that is Morgan's whole act as HK as seemingly being incredibly random and based on opportunity. She didn't even know her last victim's name, so I find it hard to imagine she'd have planned out this crime by picking a specific victim to go after. In whatever area that optics were down, she saw a guy leave an apartment and not lock the front door, so she went in and shot what was likely some random woman to her. It'd be an uncountable gamble that there'd be no people modded to record video of the area or event, and she almost did get caught if not for some stain on a window or digital artifacting or something that managed to block her face out from the lone camera that was somehow pointed at her when everything went down. That said, that's what her entire defense mindset was. In spite of all of that, Emma really couldn't argue any of this at all because she wouldn't know anything about it. She might have her suspicions, sure. There's nothing she can really do to unfurl this thread if she even notices it. For all everyone on that precinct knows, Morgan is just this overly confident and bubbly attorney. As a result, even from just one scene, there's a dense relationship dynamic to pick at. Emma and Morgan are both possibly hiding their hand from each other, keeping this outwardly friendly appearance until the cards are dealt. This is just the first episode, though. Who knows where this relationship will end up? I mean, wherever the story goes, there'll always be this undercurrent that Morgan is a wretched person who has done terrible things and has gotten away with it because she has managed to slip through the cracks. Which leads me to the conclusion I have for this little self-contained cyberpunk mystery. In the 60 years between the release of this story and when it takes place, the surveillance state has only encroached more and more. Police can skim photos of a crime without the participation or knowledge of the person who it was pulled from. Even the context of this information is absent and can be used as damning information to put innocent people in jail because they were caught at the wrong place at the wrong time. Entire populations have sacrificed their own privacy for the sake of these systems, but they can't even work right. These systems might produce a 98% conviction rate of the few crimes that do get committed, but they're so unreliable that someone could easily predict when they go out and game the system through this to harm other people. And that feels like a dystopian acceleration of obviously the surveillance state of today, but also how flawed a lot of socialization and mass communication really is. A person could be a niche micro-celebrity. They could put so much of themselves out there for other netizens to think this is what this person is. They could have so many friends and so many connections. Or they're just some wretch that only exist to bring pain to other people. Their only output is selfish gratification in some way or another. The problem is that these could be the exact same person, and no one would know who they actually were unless one of their victims came forward or someone followed the breadcrumbs. For as much information and human connection and safety we seem to think we have in the modern day, whether it be online or in real life, that there are safeguards to keep us from facing trauma, all it takes, though, is someone knowing how to slip through these safeguards, cover their track, and get away before anyone could get a good idea of who they actually are. That said, why do they do this? Why cause so much pain and suffering? Well, I already mentioned it. Gratification. Sick people who find pleasure in other people's pain have always existed. But really, it's only through modern societal structures that these sick people can exist on every level and corner, and that's just how it is. The murderer finds artistic pleasure in the death of their victims. The media scoops up any details they have about these murders and the speculation about the killer for the people that find it entertaining, no matter how fresh the body is. Prosecution finds pleasure in fighting for putting away a suspect because it will get the uproar of the media and public around a present danger off their back. The defense takes pleasure in proving the prosecution wrong. This little event of a loss of life will add fuel to a rivalry between two people in the same field. All the while, someone's been erased and the people that love them will have to learn to cope. A common theme throughout Cyberpunk is that no matter the level of wealth, fame, or power, you can at any time be turned into just another bit of oil to grease the gears by the powers that be. Except, in Of the Devil, anyone could have that power. If society doesn't end up collapsing, it could still fester. Anyone around you could be exerting their own power and control over other people for their own pleasure and gains, and getting away with it because it manages to be in the occasional blind spot. That blind spot could be in the streets or in the offices of the state. And that's what I meant with the vibe these characters give off when I was talking about the game's art style. Despite how some of these characters might play into trustworthy detective archetypes, so many of the characters in the story so far are crooked in one way or another. No one here is wholly trying to achieve or uphold some deeper value of justice as a result of everything that the criminal justice system has become. And that horrific, dystopian scenario is truly cyberpunk. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, subscribe to see more like it and more of me. If you'd have liked to see my reaction to Of the Devil as I played it, you can find the VOD of my life Twitch playthrough on my second channel. To prove his innocence, I will need to get there eventually, but going there now without hard evidence. Prove a third party. Fuck. It should be evident by just how much I had to say, but I chose not to worry about covering episode 1 as I felt there was already so much here, and that it would add even more to my plate. I will more than likely do a similar video for this though, so stay tuned.